Coming up tonight in the cruise view, the Quantum gets a second chance as we start over with a brand new sailing. We're going to take a look at what didn't work last sailing, but is this sailing. We're going to look at some of our guest services on board as we take advantage of this turnaround day and what they offer us. And we're going to dine at the Steakhouse. All coming up. Let's set sail. Welcome to day 9 of the cruise view on board the Quantum of the Seas, and today is the start of a brand new voyage and hopefully a much better sailing. And before we get into things, I did say day 9, but I'm gonna change things up a little bit. Hopefully people don't get too confused, but for me at least it's a little confusing seeing day 9 on the cruise view while everything on the ship says day 1. So at least during my planning, everything was sailing A, sailing B, day 1A, 2A, 1B, 2B, etc. So I'm going to follow that same format. So while today is the 9th episode of the Cruise View officially, it will be referred to as episode 1B for the first day of the second sailing. So hopefully you can follow along and keep track of that. But as I mentioned, it is a brand new sailing. Turnaround day in Cape Liberty, New Jersey to end that 8-night inaugural and start a brand new 11-night Southern Caribbean. And of course, we're starting off in Cape Liberty, New Jersey today before spending 2 days at sea on the way down to San Juan, Puerto Rico. We'll arrive in the afternoon there, spend the evening, and then we'll be off to Phillipsburg, St. Martin, Fort-de-France, Martinique, Bridgetown, Barbados, and then finally Basseterre, St. Kitts, before taking another 3 days this time to get back up north to Cape Liberty, New Jersey for the final time to end the Cruise View's inaugural sailing of the Quantum of the Seas. And so today we got back to Cape Liberty at roughly 7 a.m. That was the scheduled time. We seemed to arrive a bit early ahead of schedule, but the captain seemed to spend a little extra time getting things in position. I know when we were here for the original arrival of the Quantum for the first time, he went through the same sort of process once he pulled in. It took him a little while to get everything positioned absolutely right, that it worked with the pier, worked with everything in the area, and it seemed like he went through that same process again today. But he did get here early to ensure he had enough time, and we did end up docked at 7 a.m., the exact time that he originally listed for us last night. And to go along with getting here by 7 a.m., we did pass under the Verrazano-Narrows Bridge just before 6 a.m. this morning, and I made sure I was out there. Got up at 5:30, ran out there in my pajamas up to deck 16 just to get the sight of the Verrazano-Narrows Bridge passing right over top of the Quantum of the Seas in the darkness. And today, our departure was scheduled for 4 o'clock. We did not leave though until 5 p.m. At 4 p.m., there's still loads of crates and other luggage and items that had to be loaded onto the Quantum of the Seas, along with all of the crew gangways were down at the time. The passenger ones were pulled back already, but clearly some of the cargo and other items were not ready to go at 4. So we ended up leaving at exactly 5 p.m., 1 hour behind schedule. And unfortunately, we did have rain for that departure, which kind of messed it up, but it was only a light drizzle, so you could still stay out on the main decks and watch it from outside or on the bridge wings, but majority of people did choose to stay inside in the indoor pool or the adult solarium to just watch those great views out of all those windows that the Quantum of the Seas contains. And of course, roughly half hour later, about 5:30, we did pass under that Verrazano Bridge again for the third time of this sailing. So, one more time to go, a fourth before it's all over with. And of course, as I mentioned, this is the second sailing, so that means that it was a consecutive cruiser special itinerary day. And this was my first back-to-back, so also the first time that I've had to go through any of this consecutive cruiser process. So I don't really have anything to reference against or to really base an opinion off of it, so I can't really judge success, failure, any of that. But overall, it did seem like things went very smooth. They went very efficiently. It took a bit longer than I had expected, but as I said, I had nothing to reference or judge that time against. But the time was not getting through anything. We went through the process incredibly fast, but when you leave the ship, it is a very long walk all the way across the terminal and then all the way across to the front of the terminal. So it was a lot of walking. And that seemed to be the time. Wasn't really an issue getting through customs, getting back on a ship, any of that, just a lot of time consumed walking through the entire process. And of course, that's something that can't really be changed. The terminal was designed the way it is, and that's not going to change anytime soon. So it's not really a big deal. The process was smooth, nothing to really correct. It was incredibly smooth and efficient compared to the original boarding process, which is a very good thing. The only little hiccup that we had was that we did need to take photos again. At least 2 of the 3 people in my party had to take their photos again. But unlike the original boarding process where they look at your set sail, scan it, and say you don't have a photo, send you off to the side of the boarding area to a special stand that can then take your photos, and you wait in a line in order to do that. Right when they scanned the new SeaPass cards, it was right there, just like it used to be, that they could just click the button, take your picture. So it was like 10-15 seconds extra, really nothing noticeable. It probably was actually less time for them to take it than it was for me to upload it. So it wasn't really a big deal that it did not transfer and did not work properly like they had said it would. But overall, it was a very efficient process, and one that I personally cannot think of anything that they could have done differently. So that is a very good sign for at least the consecutive cruises going forward. The lunch, on the other hand, was a bit disappointing. I've heard a lot of positive things, that they have wine and stuff with it. They did not have any wine or other special events. There were no special people or anyone there. And the thing that really kind of made it seem weird was that there's no special menu. The menu was 3 appetizers, 3 entrees, and 2 desserts to choose from, all of which came from the American Icon main menu. A little odd, considering that with dynamic dining, one of the huge issues is the longer you stay on the ship, the more times you have to eat at that same restaurant with the same menu. So knowing everybody in that room has to eat that menu repeatedly, it seems like a very poor choice to serve it to them once more. So hopefully they'll change that in the future, make that something special. I have not been to American Icon for lunch. I know it does serve it for lunch on sea days, so I'm not sure if that's the typical lunch menu or if the lunch menu is just the normal dinner menu that's there. So I'll be checking that out, see what it is, and see if maybe that was the case. They just serve the normal lunch menu. But hopefully in the future they'll rethink that, do something a little special just to give you a break from the usual meals that you get on board with the new dynamic dining process. And along with that, it's only the first day of this new sailing, yet already you can clearly see that this is a new sailing. The processes on board, everything just seems like it's running smoother. It's like night and day compared to 8 days ago when we boarded for the inaugural sailing. One of the most obvious ones is that they've rethought the way that they handle the information given. The documents that are left in your room, they've got some new formats. Last week, one of the main pieces of paper that was left in your room when you checked in was a list of all your dining and entertainment reservations, but it was essentially a printout that looked almost like your account summary that you get at the end of the sailing. It was just a series of lines with each person's name and the restaurant and the day. So if you had, for instance, like we do 3 people in the cabin, you had 3 entries for your first night's dinner, 3 entries for your second night's dinner, 3 entries for your second night's show. And then once it hit the end of the page, it kind of cut off wherever it was, even mid-line, and just started printing on a second sheet. So it was a very big document that was really kind of confusing to see and understand. Today, we had a very clean, nicely formatted document that simply listed day 1, American Icon Grill. Day 2, wherever we have it, simply listed each day of the sailing and what dining reservation we had. Unfortunately, I'm not sure why they did not include the entertainment in there, so you could not get that from the printout. But overall, it was a much cleaner document, and I'm sure by next sailing, maybe they just weren't quite done with the formatting of how that mail merge or however they're generating that document is occurring. So I'm sure by the 12th, when the next people join, that document will be included in the cabins as well. And of course, it is much improved, so that'll be a very welcome change. And the other big surprise, unlike the first boarding time where we had our SeaPass cards, one of them sitting on the door, pulled it out, opened the door, and inside there you had the other SeaPass cards with the WOW bands sitting on a nice little pedestal. This time when we checked into the consecutive cruisers little waiting area, we were given an envelope with each of our SeaPass cards and our WOW bands on it, but they were not the same WOW bands as the first sailing. The first sailing's WOW bands were a little tougher rubber. They had a nice little metal clasp on it to seal it, but it had issues with being very loose. It would always sort of come undone and fall off. The new WOW bands that we received this time are entirely made of rubber. They're very stretchable. They are definitely a different style, and they attach to you in a completely different manner. They now have 3 little knobbies that you just press through the holes in order to set it. So it is much more difficult for it to fall off or come off. You don't really have the little strap to deal with that comes out of the loop or any of that. The only downside is it is incredibly difficult to get on with one hand, which is essentially how you have to do it since you're putting it on one of your hands. So it's almost like a 2-person job to get that on, and I'm not sure why, but it only seems like consecutive cruisers have these new ones. They do not have the muster station on it like the old ones. I'm not sure if maybe that's the reason. These are a new style because they do have a filing cabinet with different WOW bands, different muster stations that they use in guest services to hand out replacements. Perhaps that's a little too cumbersome now, and maybe this is the new style, and however they were handing them out before and organizing those, they just figured it was easier with consecutive cruisers to not deal with figuring out what muster station everyone is, since they weren't handed out by ship location, or I should say location within the ship, like your muster station's organized, but by the fact that you were once again coming on board. So it is different, and of course now we have 11 days to try out the new one and see how it compares by the end of it to the original one, see which one really is the better WOW band, and it'll be interesting to see in the future which one people actually receive, which one sort of gets faded out, if maybe this is a trial, since I know all these people did have the other one the first time. Maybe they're looking for some opinions, see if they should make the change or not. We weren't told anything, but it'll be interesting to see where that one goes. And then, even with things like our sports center, there have been improvements there. We did sign up for our ripcord ride once again this sailing for tomorrow morning, or actually tomorrow afternoon at 1 p.m. this time. And while there, they mentioned that Unlike last time where you could sign up once and that was it. By the end of the sailing, they had every single slot filled up. You could not book even if you wanted. Your best bet was just to get the standby line. This time they've said that by day 7, if they feel that everybody that wants a ride has made a reservation, they're then going to open it back up to everybody to book a second ride on the ripcord for day 7 through 11. So already on day 1, we're hearing these changes, these improvements to handle this longer voyage, which is a very welcome change. It is 3 extra days. That's a lot of extra time to get things accomplished and get passengers through. So it's great they're already thinking of that at this early stage. Even on the Oasis, it didn't seem like they had everything else together, but they didn't really think about when we have downtime, when things run more efficiently than expected, and there is time nobody's using it, what to do, and obviously they're already considering that, and before we even left port today. So that is another great improvement we're already seeing. And the other really surprising improvement has been Royal IQ. It actually works. That is a first for this voyage on board the Quantum of the Seas, and it instantly relinked today. So last week, got on board, wouldn't work at all, couldn't get into it until halfway through, maybe even later. And the second day, all the kiosks on the ship did not function, you could not log in, so basically across the board, Royal IQ was dead, and it seemed like it was likely related to the accounts not properly transferring, because we also saw dynamic dining issues where they could not get our reservations up properly. Basically anything on board linked to our accounts, such as the photos for embarkation they took, everything that was supposed to stay connected to us simply did not for that first 24 hours or so. So it seems like it was definitely an account transfer issue, and today it worked seamless. So we were able to come right back on board, launch the app. We had to go into the settings and unlink the old account, as it did stay logged in and it showed our old cruise information. It just didn't have any actual details to show since the sailing was over. But we just unlinked it, and then it showed us the login screen again, just like last week. Reconnect it all, and it instantly worked. The most amazing thing, though, is that not only did the app relink itself immediately, it also worked for the calendar. So for the first time, you have a lengthy calendar to look at. I mentioned yesterday the calendar was finally starting to work and thought it was related to limited data. Well, today it actually loads for a full 11 days, the entire sailing. You do have to wait a little bit. It takes 15, 20, even 30 seconds sometimes to load, but it always consistently loads that full calendar up for you. And once you have it up, you can even add your custom events to the calendar. All that works. The sports stuff still does not link to that account and calendar at all. That still seems like it's a separate system. You have to manually add it, but it's better that it actually works. You can really see the stuff for once beyond just that first day at a time. So that is a major improvement. And going along with that, the dining system worked. Seemed like they were able to probably pull up all our reservations. There's still a line to get into the dining room, but I think some of that was just people not realizing you need reservations and just showing up and going with the flow, which really holds things up. It seemed like last sailing, after that first day, we had a huge line. We never saw a line again to really get in. You might have a couple people, you might have to wait 1 or 2 checks before it was your turn, but you never stood in line. Today we once again had a line, so it might just be a first day thing, some other questions people are asking during the check-in process that slows it down, but they were able to check us in the right way, and that was functional this time. But even with that, there were some issues that still existed. The Royal IQ app still has some communication issues. They once again offered the communication part for free. You could just purchase it for $0.00, and then it's supposed to work, but it works exactly as it did last sailing, down to the person and the issue, which is very interesting because the extension number, the unique little randomly generated string, or I'm not sure what exactly generated that string of numbers, but there's a unique number attached to every person that's rather long, and it retained the same exact number for everybody in my group during the second sailing, and all three of us are experiencing the exact same issues to the exact same people as we did last sailing. I still cannot call anybody. I get unavailable. Somebody else in our party can call anybody without an issue except for me, which shows up unavailable. Another person in the party cannot text certain people. For instance, I cannot text them, but they can text me. It's really kind of weird how some of these issues are. Some are a person just can't do one functionality. Others are certain people can't have a functionality between them. So it's very unusual, but all those odd issues retain the same odd issues. So there's definitely something with those extensions and something in the back end that's related to it. So I'm not sure if other people in this sailing are experiencing the same issues. I don't know of anyone else that I've heard actually connect to that yet. So we'll see in the coming days if others report that or not. And the other, not really sure if I call this an issue or not, has to do with the Royal IQ app and the fact that when they originally announced it, one of the selling features was the fact that your compass was on it, and they made a big deal over the fact that you would now only have the digital compass and actually have to request the paper compass in your stateroom. And the compass was not available in the Royal IQ app last sailing. It still is not available this sailing, yet when you look at the daily planner, each day they still put a message at the top that says, "Go paperless and plan your day. Download Royal IQ to start." Okay, if you download it, you won't find any of this information, so I'm not sure why they still include that message. So in my opinion, that's still an issue, even if it is just poor marketing strategy or somebody not in the know of what actually is going on with the Royal IQ app. It's something that should have been corrected. That's still out there. But overall, it was a pleasant day. We had some nice weather. The sunrise was at 7:20 a.m., so just after we pulled in, the sun was starting to come up. The sky was getting brighter as we were pulling in, and then the sun came up. And this evening, we had a sunset at 4:28 p.m., though it was a bit cloudy and dark. We really could not see the sun go down or set at all. It just kind of got dark. So unfortunately, it was not a nice sunset this sailing, unlike last sailing. But we did have a high of 57 degrees. It felt a little bit warmer out on the decks than it did last week, and we had winds of 10 to 15 knots. It seemed rather mild, and it was partly cloudy conditions, but as I mentioned, as the day went on, things got darker, stormier. When we first came in, it was a very hazy, cloudy morning, hard to see New York City, but it was a very nice middle of the day until, of course, the evening when it did sprinkle a bit for the entire sail away. It started about 4 o'clock. Nothing heavy, nothing to get everyone off the decks, but just enough to be that nuisance you don't really want. And then the compass summary for today. As I mentioned, there were improvements from last sailing to this sailing with the procedures, other functionalities of the ship, and the same was with the compass. There were some improvements to this version today that was handed out compared to the same day one compass that was handed out last sailing. The most obvious was the muster drill is now far more prominent. It is now included right up in the day one box with the sunset and all the other information where you would typically look for that key piece of information. So that was a big improvement in my opinion, something that I was really sort of turned off on. Not sure why they hit it so much, since that seemed like very important information to have out there, and this time it was right up front where it should be. There's still no departure time listed though, anywhere in it, not in that main box, but not even in the listing of events. Nowhere could you find when we were departing. Not sure if that was just left off again by accident or if it was a conscious decision, because we did leave at exactly 5 o'clock instead of 4 o'clock. And when everybody booked this sailing a year and a half ago, just like the last one, departure was 5 o'clock with an arrival at 8 a.m. Some point they moved everything up by an hour, at least 6 months ago, more than that I believe actually. They moved it up by an hour to 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. So perhaps they're still not certain what time works, and they're kind of looking at how the loading of all the stuff's going and deciding 4 p.m., 5 p.m. as they go, and that may be why they don't want to list it here. But it would be nice that even if they aren't sure, they would at least announce something over the ship's system to inform people of what the true departure time is, since it's not in that compass and it's not consistent. And the one thing that I mentioned a lot was that there were not many events on the last sailing, and of course Jimmy Rhodes towards the end did promise the sailing would be different, and true to his word, it was. Already on day 1 we had some events that did not appear until day 6 of the last sailing. So that is a huge jump in days, and hopefully this will continue. We'll keep getting these events with each day, and we don't just suddenly get day 1 and then a gap until the next one. I did peek at the next compass, and I can confirm there are events on there that were also not until the end of last sailing. So we are going to get a much fuller cruise compass, and they also moved venues on some of the things, which seems like a great improvement. A lot of stuff was held at Music Hall that was very heavily used, and unfortunately a lot of events were very empty. Now there are some benefits to Music Hall and some negatives that I'll mention in a moment, but the other thing was there were still some bad times. The main ones were those evenings right in the middle of shows and dinner when everybody's kind of busy running around the ship. There are game shows scheduled that people just can't get to, and as a result they're left empty. But let's take a look at some of the events, and I'll touch back on those points again. And of course 3 o'clock was the all aboard, everybody must be on the ship, with the muster drill scheduled for 3:30 p.m. 30 minutes before the original 4 p.m. departure, which I still think is a little later. I'm pretty sure it used to be an hour, but it was enough time that we're done about 3:50, plenty of time to still get out there even if we had a 4 p.m. departure. But then tonight, as I mentioned, we did have a game show. We had the Majority Rules game show, which was the one that they scheduled for 1 p.m. on our Coco Cay day when it got washed out by the rough seas, as well as its originally intended evening showing the very next day. So that's late in last sailing. It's now day 1 right up front in this sailing, and they also moved it to Boleros. So now the time slot is still poor. It's still a time not many people are available. Everyone's got a show to go to, or they have dinner to go to, and tonight, day 1, they also have unpacking to do and a ship to explore. So it was incredibly empty, in fact a smaller crowd than it was last sailing. But Boleros is a smaller, more intimate venue, was a little more suited to it. As I mentioned, pros and cons. Music Hall was right across from the theater. You had a lot of people that would show up to watch, participate, head straight over to their show, or a show would let out and a lot of people would come straight over to watch the event. So depending on how they timed it, they never got it right, but they usually could get a little more crowd to at least watch it at some points during the game show. The new venue, you're off of the Royal Esplanade, and that gives you more ability for walk-ins. It is wide open to it, everyone in there can hear it, you got a lot of traffic going by, so you might get some more people in, but you do lose those big crowds, so it's hard to say whether or not that move will help or hurt it. In this case, it was not a larger crowd, but there were other factors to include in that, so I'm not sure we can really say if it worked or not. I know tomorrow there's another game show also scheduled in Boleros, so I think that'll be a little better test of whether the move is working or not. And then tonight, from 10 to 11:30 in Music Hall, was the tribute band for this sailing, the Beatlemaniacs. So of course last week we had Bon Jovi, this week we now have the Beatles.
These are real now, sitting in his nowhere.
So every week is of course a different tribute band, and it's a little interesting to see Bon Jovi to Beatles, just how different not only the sound and the vibe of the venue, but just how different the crowds that show up act and behave as they watch it. It really is a completely different show, and it's interesting to see this sailing is a much older crowd than the last sailing, which was over a holiday period. There were more families and kids on board, so I wonder if they included that in their planning when they chose Bon Jovi last time and Beatles this time, as it does sort of fit the audience of the ship very well. So overall, much better compass than last week. It is only day one. There's of course 10 more of these to come throughout the sailing. We'll see if the rest are equally improved, and so far it seems like a good sign that they will be. But let's move on to tonight's venue. And right now I'm in the next cruise desk, a perfect place to start off the next cruise. And that's also going to be one of our special venue tours for today, as we take a look at all the guest services on board the Quantum of the Seas. There are a variety of resources available to guests depending on what their needs are. First one is the excursions area, and this is also the location for Royal IQ. You can walk up to any of the tablets located at the various stations, tap your WOW band or your SeaPass card, or alternatively type in your cabin and personal information in order to pull up your profile. From there, you can then go through and select the excursions that you want, or just view excursions available at the various ports of call of your current itinerary. Once you've made your selection, you can instantly purchase your excursions right on those tablets, and once done, you can then print those tickets out immediately, and they come out right underneath the desk, and you can take them back and be on your way. The next cruise area is of course where you can go to book your next cruise, but it also offers services to current Crown and Anchor members as well as those on their first cruise looking to enroll in the Crown and Anchor Society. It is the location for anything related to both loyalty and returning to another cruise. They offer appointments daily, usually from about 9 a.m. till 6 p.m., though the hours can vary based on sea and land days. They also manage things related to the Royal Caribbean credit card as well as any other Royal Caribbean related purchases. So if you're looking for a place to find anything related to Royal Caribbean or your next cruise, the next cruise area is the place to go. The Focus Photo Gallery on board the Quantum of the Seas has a renewed focus on going digital and green. Instead of finding a wall of all your photos that you look through to pick out which one is yours and choose if you want it, everything is done digitally. Unlike the Oasis of the Seas though, where things were done digitally but you also had a portfolio that included all of your physical photos, there are no pictures printed on board the Quantum of the Seas unless you specifically purchase them. Instead, you simply walk up to one of the kiosks, touch your SeaPass card or WOW band, and it'll pull up all the photos attached to you. You can then choose to like or remove any photos depending on your opinion of them, and you can come back at any time later to purchase those photos. When you do purchase them, you have the option to either buy a physical photo along with the portfolios like you have been in the past, or you can buy a digital CD that includes the digital copies of the photos with complete copyright removal, so that you can feel free to do whatever you want with them, including print as many copies as you want. If you find that a photo is missing, there are also special kiosks that you can go to, and you can look through every unclaimed photo in the system in order to determine where your photo is and claim it as your own. The guest services area on board the Quantum of the Seas has also received a high-tech upgrade with new Royal IQ kiosks to help you self-service yourself, and instead of the long queues in order to get up to a desk in order to have your questions answered, they now have mobile people with tablets that can go through and try to assist people as they show up, and if needed, they also have series of stations with IMAX in order to properly assist somebody in the more traditional manner. So as you saw, there are a lot of different spaces that involve guest services on board the Quantum of the Seas. The one thing they all seem to have in common though, the reliance on the WOW band or the RFID cards. Just walk up to any of those little icons, tap it, and you're straight in. It seems to be the standard process now. No more logging in, no more entering room numbers or any other confidential information. Just tap and get into what you want. And last sailing, as mentioned, that was an issue at the start, worked towards the end, and so far it is working. So all these guest services are fully functional, it seems like, at this point. And then let's move on to our daily dine for this evening. Tonight we're gonna take a look at another full service menu, this time Chops Grille, the original signature steakhouse from way back when on Royal Caribbean that's been on all their recent builds.
Welcome to Chops Grille. Chops Grille is Royal Caribbean's hallmark steakhouse, which has been around for over a decade. Chops Grille is known for serving the first steaks at sea, as Royal Caribbean like to be known for doing a lot of first things at sea. The cover charge for Chops Grille is $35 per person. We do also have some items that we sell at an upcharge. For instance, we do a 28-day dry-aged steak that we are selling a porterhouse and a New York strip steak. We also do a Maine lobster that we have an upcharge as well. We have some delectable desserts. We have beautiful appetizers. What else? And Chops Grille is located on deck 5 on the forward part of the ship, next to the schooner bar.
And now, as we start to bring this episode to a close, a few last minute details to discuss. Last sailing, we did have a few film crews on board. We had a German network film crew on board, as well as a bunch of people from Asia doing some kind of documentary for China. Not sure if that was an official Royal Caribbean one or a third-party one, but we did have 2 international film crews filming throughout the sailing, just randomly around with cameras popping up at different events and different parts of the ship just to start filming. This sailing, we once again have a film crew, except they're a little more professional, it seems like, where the others just kind of randomly around. You'd have a guy with a mic and a camera just pop up in the middle of a crowd. It was kind of awkward and unusual. This time we have, from Discovery Channel, the team behind Mighty Ships, a very popular show that I'm sure most of you watching that have been watching this whole time and care about ships has seen. They've done specials on Oasis and many other ones in the past. Now they're on board to film the Quantum of the Seas. And already when I was walking deck 15, you head out towards the pool, there's a huge sign informing you that the team from Mighty Ships is on board filming in this area, and that if you enter this area you might be included in some of their shots. So if you don't want to be, stay away from that area, which is something we never saw or heard from the other 2 film crews. So clearly they're already a step up above the rest of the teams when it comes to professionalism, and that's nice to see. It's also Discovery Channel, very big networks. I'm sure it's going to be top quality, and cannot wait to see what they come up with when it finally does air. Not sure of a time frame. I'll see if I can get one, and hopefully by the end of this I'll be able to give some kind of information on that. But going along with that, I also received a letter in my cabin today, the one that I've been expecting for a little while. I was talking to a few people last week to try to find out what was going on with it, but I did finally receive the letter informing me that I'll get to do some interviews on board. So tomorrow morning I'll be meeting with someone to discuss that, and hopefully, if everything goes as planned, by tomorrow night I'll have enough concrete information that I'll be able to start including interviews in these series. Not sure how many, but hopefully we'll get enough to fill these final 10 days that are coming up of the Cruise View. And one last thing, walking around the ship, I mentioned that overall things just seem to be working smoother, a much better one. On a very positive note, for me at least, this evening I was walking into 270 and ran into Joff Eden, my personal favorite cruise director from the Independence of the Seas. And he is currently checking out the Quantum of the Seas, doing some prep for Anthem, getting everything ready, part of the big Anthem rollout team, and just making sure that once Anthem comes into operations in the spring, things are up and running smooth from day one. So that is a very good sign, and he'll be on board for the next 11 days, so that'll be great to see him around the ship. And I'm looking forward to talking to him a little later in this sailing, see what he's been up to. But that about does it for today. Once again, I'm Derek Picone, and stay tuned for the future episodes. We got a lot of great stuff coming up in this second half of the CruiseView series. And of course, stay tuned. We got some links to some great videos from today.